On live television, the tension was palpable as one voice attempted to undercut another with a smug sense of confidence. It was the kind of moment where tone, posture, and carefully chosen words all came together in an effort to assert dominance. The target? A woman known not just for her sharp intellect, but for her unwavering composure under pressure. The strategy was clear: interrupt, belittle, dismiss. But what unfolded next wasn't a victory for the instigator. Instead, it became a turning point in the conversation and a viral lesson in why underestimating someone based on appearance or assumption is a dangerous game. In these settings, there's often an unspoken expectation that if you come in loud, enough or with enough self-righteous energy, you can hijack the spotlight. That tactic works sometimes, when the other party isn't prepared, when they shrink under scrutiny, when they feel outnumbered or unsupported. But this time, it backfired. The moment that tried to be a power move ended up exposing the desperation beneath the surface. The intended jab wasn't particularly clever. It was a clumsy attempt to provoke, thinly veiled as political discourse. It sounded rehearsed, like something prepped in front of a mirror, practiced to come off as bold or scathing. But when words are hollow, they land with a thud, and the silence that followed that comment was louder than anything said before it. It was the kind of silence that demanded attention, that told the viewer something was about to shift. And then it did. Because instead of reacting with visible anger or frustration, the target of that moment leaned into her truth. Her response didn't need volume to be powerful. It was layered with authority, rich with the kind of clarity that only comes when you've faced this kind of disrespect before, and long since figured out how to dismantle it without breaking a sweat. She didn't respond to the insult directly. She didn't raise her voice or throw back the same kind of dismissive energy. Instead, she framed the entire exchange in a way that instantly turned the spotlight away from the petty and back onto the meaningful. What was meant to be a moment of humiliation for her became one of embarrassment for the person who tried it. It became obvious who had done their homework. It became obvious who had walked in armed with facts and self-control, not just a loud opinion. It became obvious who had the range. There's something deeply satisfying about watching someone try to play chess and get outmaneuvered in just a few moves. That's exactly what happened. The exchange wasn't just about one comment or one conversation. It was a case study in what happens when someone mistakes confidence for superiority. Confidence, real confidence, is quiet. It doesn't have to interrupt others to be heard. It doesn't have to insult to feel powerful. That's what was on display here. The result? One side looking visibly rattled, scrambling to reassert a position that was already crumbling, and the other side as composed as ever, never once losing grip on the message she was there to deliver. The difference was night and day. One side seemed more interested in provoking a reaction than presenting ideas. The other was rooted in a deeper understanding, not just of policy or public discourse, but of human nature, of how these moments play out in the court of public opinion. And of course, the cameras captured all of it. The body language, the expression, the subtle shift in tone. The internet caught on immediately, replaying the exchange with captions and commentary pointing out the obvious. This wasn't just a failed insult, it was a failed strategy. The attempt to control the narrative through dismissal didn't just fall flat. It became the moment that defined the entire interaction, and not in the way its architect intended. In that space, under those lights, what was meant to be a silencing moment became a platform. Not because of theatrics or shouting, but because of something far more powerful. Presence. When someone steps fully into themselves and refuses to play small just because someone else is trying to shrink the room, it resonates. And that resonance is what truly echoed long after the microphones were cut. It didn't take long before the internet erupted. The clip hit social media platforms within minutes, and the reaction was immediate, intense, and overwhelmingly unified. What had started as a tense exchange on live television quickly transformed into a cultural flashpoint, and not because of conflict, but because of how brilliantly it was handled. The energy online was electric, with people across political lines, communities, and backgrounds all zeroing in on one thing: her response. It was one of those rare moments when a single clip manages to transcend the noise of the news cycle. It wasn't just that the reply was sharp, it was that it embodied a kind of calm, commanding confidence that people crave in their leaders. She didn't just speak for herself. In that brief, unforgettable moment, she became a stand-in for everyone who's ever been dismissed, talked down to, or underestimated in public spaces. And the internet knew it instantly. Social media thrives on moments that are authentic, emotionally resonant, and impossible to ignore. This moment checked all three boxes, but it wasn't just a flash-in-the-pan viral hit, it felt meaningful. People weren't sharing it just to laugh or to mock the situation. They were sharing it because it resonated on a deeper level. Comments poured in from viewers who felt seen, who recognized their own experiences in hers, who felt empowered by the sheer precision of how she held her ground without losing her cool. Hashtags popped up almost instantly. Memes followed. Edits with captions like, "How to handle disrespect with elegance" and "This is how you do it" flooded timelines. And while the internet can often be fickle, chasing novelty one minute and forgetting it the next, this moment had staying power. It tapped into something people were hungry for, an example of how to respond to bad faith attacks with intellect, not outrage. Even more impressive was the way the conversation evolved. Commentators began breaking down the moment frame by frame. Analysts pointed out the subtleties in her tone, the way she paused, the structure of her sentences. It wasn't just a spontaneous reaction, it was strategic communication at its finest, and it was done live, with no script, no teleprompter, no time to prepare. That kind of composure under pressure doesn't just impress, it inspires. This wasn't about political sides anymore. It had become bigger than that. It became about dignity in the face of disrespect, about clarity in the fog of chaos. It became about how to show up in moments when others try to reduce you to a soundbite. She refused to be minimized. And that refusal turned into a rallying cry online. People began to recount similar moments from their own lives, times they wished they had responded the way she did. Teachers, students, professionals, parents, all reflecting on what it means to be confronted and how vital it is to remain rooted in who you are. Her words gave them language for situations that had left them speechless. That's a rare kind of impact, not just influencing thought, but equipping people to face their own challenges. Even major media outlets took notice. The clip aired again and again, not as a moment of drama, but as a symbol of poise and purpose. Analysts weren't just interested in the politics, they were drawn to the discipline. The contrast between the attempt to provoke and her refusal to engage in anything beneath her level was what struck people the most. It reminded the public that real strength doesn't look like shouting. It looks like knowing exactly when and how to speak. The digital applause didn't come from chaos. It came from respect. She didn't have to raise her voice to raise the bar. And that's what everyone online was responding to. In a world full of noise, where attention is currency, she earned hers not through spectacle, but through substance. She didn't just go viral, she went vital. Her presence, her words, and her restraint reminded people that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain calm while making your point unmistakably clear. The internet doesn't always celebrate moments like this, but this time, it did. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. And it's rare that a moment of confrontation on live television transforms into something so impactful it begins to shift the cultural conversation. But when it happens, you know immediately that you're witnessing more than just a viral soundbite. You're watching history. That's exactly what unfolded when a calculated jab was thrown during a political panel, aimed squarely at a woman who many expected to either deflect or downplay the situation. Instead, she delivered a response so perfectly balanced between intellect and composure that it stopped the room cold and rewrote the trajectory of the exchange. What set this moment apart wasn't just the quality of her words, though those alone were powerful. It was the way she said them, with intention, clarity, and a grace that didn't just match the energy thrown at her but completely eclipsed it. In the seconds following the comment directed her way, she didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She didn't respond in kind. What she did was far more effective. She redirected the energy. shifted the tone, and took control of the room in a way that only someone deeply grounded in their truth can. Her voice didn't rise, but the authority in it did. There was no scramble for the right comeback. No need for verbal gymnastics. What she offered instead was a sharp, deliberate response rooted in experience, fortified by conviction. She spoke not just for herself, but for every person who's ever been underestimated, interrupted, or talked over. She turned what could have been a fleeting moment of disrespect into a statement that resonated far beyond the confines of that stage. And what made the moment historic wasn't just that she stood her ground, it's that she redefined what standing your ground looks like. She didn't play into the chaos. She didn't match the pettiness. She elevated the conversation while simultaneously dismantling the attempt to undermine her. That's a rare skill, to deliver correction and dignity in the same breath. Almost immediately, people recognized it. Clips of her response started circulating online at lightning speed, and it wasn't just about the viral nature of her words, it was about the feeling those words evoked. People weren't cheering for a gotcha moment. They were applauding. Her ability to make it clear that strength isn't always loud, that poise under pressure is its own kind of power, and that when you know who you are, no one can use their platform to define you. There was something surgical about her clapback. It didn't seek revenge. It sought clarity. It reframed the entire exchange in real time, exposing the shallow tactics being used against her without ever naming them directly. It was the kind of rhetorical finesse you see rarely, the kind that sends a message far more powerful than confrontation ever could. I see what you're doing, and it doesn't move me. That's why the response made history. Not because it embarrassed anyone. Not because it made headlines, but because it became a cultural reference point, an example of how to respond when dignity is tested in public. It provided a blueprint, especially for those often pushed to the margins of political discourse, on how to hold your space with both strength and elegance. It wasn't just her words, it was her energy. She didn't look shaken. She didn't look unsure. She looked like she had been here before and would be here again. That calm assurance, that deeply felt presence, is what made people sit up and pay attention. It wasn't just about defending herself. It was about affirming that moments like this don't get to define her. They get to highlight her. And in a political landscape too often marred by shouting matches and one-upmanship, she offered something radically different, a moment of truth that didn't rely on performance. A moment that stood on its own because it was real, measured, and absolutely unshakable. The result was undeniable. She wasn't just clapping back, she was teaching. She was showing in real time what happens when someone knows their worth so thoroughly that attempts to undermine them become opportunities to inspire instead. It was a masterclass in public grace, delivered not with fury, but with fire. There's a certain kind of confidence that can't be faked. It doesn't come from talking the loudest or trying to dominate a room. It comes from knowing exactly who you are, what you stand for, and what you bring to the table. That's the kind of energy she brought to the moment. A calm, unshakable force that made it crystal clear. If you're going to come for her, you'd better be ready. Because she's not just going to respond, she's going to own the room. That's what made the entire exchange so captivating. The setup was obvious. The tone, the interruptions, the passive-aggressive phrasing, it was a textbook attempt to catch her off guard, to rattle her, to draw her into a defensive position. But she didn't take the bait. She didn't flinch, stumble, or let anyone pull her off track. Instead, she waited, measured the moment, and responded with a precision that was almost surgical. In seconds, she shifted the dynamic completely. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her power wasn't in volume, it was in command. Every word she delivered was intentional, landing with clarity and weight. She showed that true strength lies in restraint, in being able to stay rooted even when someone else is trying to pull you into chaos. That's a kind of composure that can't be taught in a weekend seminar. It's earned through experience, through weathering storms and learning exactly how to protect your space. What made it even more powerful was how she did it all with a certain calm that's impossible to ignore. She didn't just respond, She redirected. She took a moment meant to belittle her and transformed it into a platform. She spoke with a confidence that made it clear she didn't need validation from anyone in that room. Her presence was enough. Her words were enough, and her refusal to be shaken made her unforgettable. There's an art to knowing when to speak and how to do it in a way that silences everything else. She mastered that art in real time, and what she delivered wasn't just a response. It was a reminder that strength doesn't always look like a counterattack. Sometimes strength is about staying centered, letting the moment unfold, and then stepping in with truth that cuts through all the noise. That's why so many people reacted with such admiration. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she carried herself while saying it. There was no desperation, no scrambling for a comeback, no performative outrage. She didn't match hostility with more hostility. She stayed on message, on purpose, and on point. That kind of discipline is rare, especially in a setting designed to provoke emotion and spectacle. But she wasn't there to play games. She was there to represent her truth, her community, and her values. And she did just that. She took control of the moment and made it her own, not by overpowering others, but by standing so firmly in her identity that no one could shake it. That's what left people talking. That's what made the clip go viral. It wasn't drama. It was mastery. And it served as a warning to anyone watching. This is not someone you can rattle with a cheap shot or a condescending remark. If you're going to challenge her, you better come with more than attitude. You better come with substance, facts, and a whole lot more respect. Because she's not here to be anyone's punching bag or soundbite. She's here to speak, to lead, and to hold her own without compromising her integrity. This kind of public composure doesn't just earn applause, it sets a standard. It raises the bar for what strength looks like in public discourse. It tells every person watching, especially those who've been talked over or dismissed, that you can hold your ground with grace, you can rise above disrespect, and you can do it without ever stooping to the level of those who try to tear you down. In a world where chaos often gets more attention than clarity, she proved that poise still wins. And in doing so, she reminded everyone, if you're going to bring conflict, you'd better be ready for the kind of calm that dismantles it completely. In the aftermath of the exchange, one thing became unmistakably clear. This wasn't just a viral moment, it was a defining one. The kind of moment that lingers in public memory, not because it was loud or outrageous, but because it was rooted in undeniable presence and power. She didn't need theatrics, she didn't need to shout, she simply stood firm in who she is, and that was more than enough. What made this moment resonate so deeply with people was its authenticity. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't part of a strategy to go viral. It was real. And in a time where so much of public discourse feels performative or forced, authenticity shines like a beacon. Her words didn't just silence a weak attempt to discredit her, they uplifted others who have experienced the same kind of dismissiveness, especially in high-stakes spaces where being both brilliant and composed is often overlooked. This wasn't just a win for her. It was a win for everyone who has ever been told to stay in their place, to smile through disrespect, or to shrink in the face of power. By choosing to respond with intellect instead of insult, with clarity instead of chaos, she set a new standard for what effective leadership and public communication can look like. The way she handled the moment will be studied, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so masterfully restrained. She offered a blueprint, especially for young people watching, on how to navigate confrontation with dignity. She didn't just protect her own voice, she amplified it in a way that made others feel seen and heard. And perhaps most importantly, she reminded everyone that grace is not weakness, that staying composed is not a sign of backing down, that speaking firmly and calmly can be more disarming than any insult. In that moment, she didn't just clap back, she elevated the entire conversation. As people continue to share, dissect, and celebrate what happened, they're not just praising a single moment, they're recognizing a movement. A shift toward valuing substance over spectacle. A reminder that leadership isn't about overpowering others, It's about standing so confidently in your truth that no one can take it from you. This moment will be remembered not because someone tried to diminish her, but because she refused to be diminished. She turned what was meant to be a detour into a defining moment, and in doing so, she walked away, not just unshaken, but revered. Not just heard, but remembered. And that, in every